We all have days, weeks where we're just not feeling it. Leave it at the door, turn the camera on, pretend you're feeling it, and then pick up life after you turn the camera off.
If you're not feeling one piece of the process, maybe you work on another piece of the process or try to do some different things that kind of keep the project moving along, but you don't have to feel this pressure to do it all at once.
Tap into that personality. Whatever those personality traits are that you need to bring out, figure out how to switch in and out of that as needed, because there's going to be a time when you're going to just need to sit there and smile. Regardless of everything else that's going around you, you're going to need to be able to do this and get into that work. Hey everybody, welcome to the Visual Lounge. We're so glad you're here. We've got an episode I think you're going to find super interesting, because sometimes when you go to make a video, you're just not feeling it and you feel like, how am I going to get this done? What can I do to push through, or do I just wait till another time, which isn't always an option. So I've got Justin and Andy with me today. We're going to be talking about this and digging in through our own maybe empathy of how you might feel and maybe how we're feeling. So gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Let's talk about this, because this is a real problem. Maybe the first video you're super excited about, but maybe you're on your 50th video and it feels like, how am I going to make this video? You're not feeling that thing. So what advice can we give to our audience to help them when they're in that feeling, that maybe that rut, because they've made a few videos and it's not feeling like they're super excited about this one? Maybe because it's not exciting, or maybe because they're just tired, exhausted. The world has made their lives a little bit more difficult, whatever it might be. So who would like to start us off here?
I can jump in on this one. I think it's that point of empathy, right? Like, we've all felt that, where, and it doesn't have to just be related to video, where you're doing something a lot and you just hit that point, that wall where I don't want to do another one. And you know what? In video, at least for me, I feel like that's the time to change things up. Like, if you hit a wall, in fact, probably 2 videos before that one was time to change things up. And that can be, maybe it's topical. Maybe you don't like talking about the topic you've chosen and you feel limited by it. Maybe it's talked about this on my own personal profile on LinkedIn. Sometimes I get bored with my own shot. You can see, from week to week, we've changed up our own shots a little bit even. And I feel like that brings something different. Sometimes it's editing. Maybe you're just doing a simple fade in, fade out, and you're bored with it and you want to try jump cuts or something a little different. Whatever it is, find something to change it up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely think that's easier said than done, right? Because I think about, I've gotten the same setup now for several months, and I've been thinking about changing it up. And I will say, Andy, I feel like it is a lot of work for me to change it up now. Like, just the logistics of what do I put in my background? How much effort do I want to do? Because I could paint, although I will say I purchased some practical lights for behind me, but now we're talking about moving rooms and changing where the office. It's like, it's so much work. If I put it up, I don't want to change it too much. So that's good advice. So keep changing it up. What about you, Justin? What advice would you give at this point to yourself even?
Yeah, I think for me, I love the advice from Andy there to swap things up, and maybe it's just a small thing. Maybe you use the same intro and the same music, or you do the same, something just to refresh, and reset what you've been doing to kind of give it new life. But for me, I think my greatest advice to accomplish something when you're not feeling it is to take it bit by bit and to kind of chunk it up. And so, my first thought when you brought that up was this idea of sort of why we're having even this series is like, when you have yourself set up in a video workflow and you can kind of break those pieces up, it feels a little less daunting of like, man, I've got to make a video. It's like, well, step 1 is, outline, or, start your script. Okay, cool. I can get my script done. Then I'm, maybe a third of the way there. And then maybe I got to shoot or record it. And then you can kind of break it up into that. And so it doesn't feel as daunting of a task to make yet another video.
Yeah. And can I even jump in there and say, sometimes it feels like, when you're scripting and then shooting and then editing, and maybe you're not doing all those parts. Maybe you're really just going off the cuff and recording a webcam video, and that's fine too. But like when you do split it up into those sections, you also sometimes unintentionally do what we call shoot to edit, right? So now when I'm actually filming something after I've scripted it, I can think about like how I'm going to edit it. I'm gonna, oh, this is the intro, so I'm gonna talk, like an intro, and oh, during the video, I've got 5 points, so I can kind of lead from one end to the other, and it almost reframes your thinking on like, oh, when I edit it, like I don't need to say all that section over there because I'm gonna address that later on. So I don't know how I got on this scripting tangent, but scripting honestly feels like it helps you kind of better prepare for the shoot and the edit. And so I feel like that is another way of changing things up where you almost make less work for yourself by doing that work up front.
Well, I definitely like this idea of breaking it up. I think it makes it easier. It's the advice I give to my kids when they're working on projects, right, in school. It's like, hey, you don't have to do the whole project. You just have to do the piece of the project, and then you can, work through it. I also think there's something about, it's about finding the right headspace to be in to record and building practices to get there, right? Like there's routine. I know for like when I go live for TechSmith on Thursdays, there are certain things I've kind of set up that I know I'm going to do during that. I give myself an hour of prep time, right? And that's kind of all the last minute things, right? Making sure I've got all my questions, making sure I've got everything kind of in place that needs to be in my video switcher. But there's processes that I go through as well that are there for me to get ready. Like if those get kind of thrown out of whack, I kind of lose like, oh my gosh, feel thrown off. And so I think building some of those habits of like, these are the things I'm going to do before I go into a recording that make me comfortable and get me in the right kind of frame of mind, I think are really important as well. And I can imagine, depending on what part of the video creation process you're doing, you might have that, right? And this is not something I do, but I can imagine this might be helpful for some, is like having a pump up song. And in fact, for this show, our little intro music, I love it just because it gives me like a sense of like initial burst of energy. Like, oh yeah, that's the kind of feeling we want. So I think having those kind of mental pieces in place, habits, whatever you want to call them, can really help you get to that kind of mental space of like, okay, now I'm recording a video, or I'm going into editing my video, and get into the right mindset.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm just laughing because like, as you're sitting here talking, for anyone who's watching today's podcast and not listening to it, my color is shifting like crazy. And it's because I tried something different today. I figured, with the clouds and everything, maybe I'll put it on auto white balance, but instead all that's done is really screw up my color. But honestly, it was worth a shot. I thought I'd give it a try and see if in this environment it helped me. I like the idea of getting in the headspace though. I think that's one thing that, man, that can't be said enough. When I go into the video studio to record something, a lot of people will put on music. I'm a weirdo though, and I like listening to either a comedy album or something. Just kind of like something to kind of let my brain wander while I'm, setting up lights and checking my, audio levels and everything. And so I'll put my AirPods in and just start listening to something. But then usually for about 15 minutes prior to recording, I'll go over my script or outline and really get in that headspace of what it is we're going to record and talk about. Because if you just go in cold, it shows. So I think as we're talking about like, making videos when you're not feeling it, it's like, well, sometimes you got to set aside that time to consider your subject, consider it from a new angle too, right? Like maybe the topic's gotten stale. So it's time to look at it from another direction.
Yeah, for sure.
One other thing that I would say as far as, if you're not feeling it, sometimes the way, some of the not feeling it can lead to procrastination, at least for me, in terms of like, if there isn't any sort of definition, like I've got to make this series of videos at some point, So I would say a good, deadline spur action. So give yourself a due date and maybe get somebody who can help you keep accountable on that due date. For us, a lot of times it's like we have a project manager who helps us manage a lot of the videos we're making. But if not, you could see how those things could kind of balloon out or not stay. And sometimes just needing a little bit of a like, oh, this is due Friday. Like, okay, I've got to start cranking on this and really dedicating the time and setting the time aside. Because I think especially when you're not feeling stuff, like, man, that is so easy just to kick that thing down the road and like fill in your day with something else, or maybe purposely fill in your day with other tasks so you don't have to work on that thing, and you can still say you were busy. So I think giving yourself a due date can also help kind of spur action there.
There
Well,
was a
and
time. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and I think I like with that idea. I also think the time boxing of that task, like don't allow yourself to take all day to film a video. Like one of the things we do for these episodes, that I really like is we say we have an hour, and that's going to be our prep time. That's our talking, making sure we're all kind of in alignment. What kind of where we generally want the conversation to go. That is the recording of it. Then that's kind of any post conversation that needs to happen, and and I'm including uploading the video to Dropbox, and Andy's not probably editing it in the hour, but like I love the idea of like don't only just have those deadlines, but give yourself only a certain amount, and that could be really constraining. That could be really hard, and that can be really good because I think sometimes it pushes us to make better content.
Yeah,
I think
there was a
having
time. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, man.
I was going to say that we're just making Matt switch back and forth. There was a time when I taught students where I used the analogy of deadlines, and this can be true more than just video, but like deadlines are like a gas, in that a gas will fill the container it's stored in, right? Whether it's a big container or a small container, a deadline will do the same thing. You put a deadline on a 2-week period versus a 2-day period versus 2-hour period. I can crush through a video in any amount of time. I'm going to spend more time perfecting it. I'm going to spend more time agonizing over the details, or even just agonizing over the point of having to do it if I have more time. So sometimes really time boxing it, like Matt said. In fact, when we first started, just to get real meta, when we first started doing this recording, Matt, it was you, I think, who said like, I don't want to spend more than like an hour editing this thing. And so like we even shifted over to now I edit them, and like I kind of keep that top of mind where it's like, this shouldn't take me more than an hour. And I think we've got it. I think you even said actually half an hour. And so it's like 30 minutes and I'm done. And then I move on to the next thing. Because otherwise, I could spend all day trying to perfect this. But at a certain point, it's going to, something's got to get sacrificed. So either it's the quality or the perfectionism or another deadline, because I should be working on something else. So you've got to pick one of those things.
It's hard to perfect this, Andy. Whatever this is, it's hard to perfect.
I think that's the tough thing with video too, is that, I mean, definitely for a professional, but then for a non-professional too, it's hard to know when done is done on that video, right? Because you could tweak and you could change and you could alter until the video literally could never get finished if you were looking for, and not even from a perfection standpoint, just from there's a ton of options when you're trying to make a video and trying to do things. So
I have friends who paint and they say the same thing's true of a canvas, right? I mean, when is this canvas a painting? When is it done? Like I could keep adding colors. I could keep adding, new designs to it. But at a certain point, I want this to be finished. I want this to be a finished piece. And I think it's true of any kind of art. Even if we're just making like, a technical video and we're not trying to make art, but it's still like I could add transitions, I could add an intro, I could add lower thirds, I could add graphics, I could polish those graphics. Oh, it's kind of going over this frame and now it's in the next shot and I cut that. Like how detailed does this particular video need to be? If this is something that's going to live for years, you're making evergreen content, spend more time on it. But if you're doing, a weekly podcast like us, maybe spending too much time on it is going to really constrain the rest of your life, and you don't want to do that. So you have to put a box around that time.
Well, and I think the other thing is you might not, like if we were to spend more time on this, we probably just wouldn't do it, right? Because like we're balancing so many other things, and to get buy-in from the organization, you have to be able to say like, we're going to only do this much. But the other thing I want to mention here is like in terms of, it's never done. This is why Hollywood is able to take a movie and then have the editor's cut and then maybe another editor's cut and version, right? Like we're seeing that happen nowadays. And I think like this is like, you can have all these different versions, but you have to decide for your organization, like, when's the cutoff? Like, when do you say that, okay, we're going to stop here? Because I've seen folks do this, like they just keep going and going and going. And you're like, I don't really care at this point. I just need it. And that
Yeah.
can be really detrimental. And if you and maybe you love it so much, and I imagine Hollywood directors love their stuff so much that they're willing to keep crafting and honing. And same with painters, right? Like, oh, it's never going to be done. I'm gonna make it this awesome thing. But like for most of us in our jobs, the videos, like your technical videos you're making, you're probably not saying this is my masterpiece. This is the thing that I will be known for throughout eternity. It is, it is. You're like, you just need to have that for your own sanity, because otherwise, you will get burned out so quickly making your tutorial videos.
Well, it happened, I mean, back at the beginning of 2020, before we knew everything was shutting down. Actually, when everything was still open, we had a YouTube series that never saw the light of day because, and mostly on my part, where like I really wanted it to be better than the last series we had. I wanted it to be the next big thing that we produced, and I spent time and time and time, and I would send it to stakeholders, and it would get reviewed and reviewed, and it got in this kind of endless loop where we never ended up launching it. Like we filmed 2 episodes, it never saw the light of day. My own perfectionism, I feel like, got in my head. We had a number of stakeholders, which honestly is good when you're doing something that has kind of an internal value for the company, right? Like if this is about a product, we want to make sure it looks great. But if it's just something that, like this podcast is definitely something that we want to represent our company well, but it doesn't need to be perfectly honed, and edited meticulously. And I felt like this other series did. And so I just got in my head about it, and I couldn't finish it. And so, I mean, even on a professional level, like there's some stuff I've worked on that never saw the light of day, that, maybe someday we'll go back and revisit. But yeah, I don't know how to get over that own hump in my own mind sometimes, where it's like, all right, is this the thing that needs to be perfect, or do I just need to be done?
Done. And I
I know.
almost wonder, I mean, sometimes I almost wonder too, like I get to that point where I get so tired of it, I'm just like, I'm done. And so there's a balance here, right? Because I get to the point where I'm so done, and it does need work. It needs something. But I'm like, I am so over this. I just can't.
Yeah.
And this happens with my writing a lot of times. I'll be like, I can't read this anymore. Or I can't go back and watch this video again because I'm so over it. So I think there is a balance there. But I think this is where we need, and that's why I think we need other people to be there with us, right?
Yeah.
Like someone else to be that, like, no, you've got this, or this is really good, or hey, no, it actually does need a little bit more work. Like finding those partnerships of people that you can trust and can give you feedback or can encourage you is really key to help you. And whether that's recording or editing or writing or whatever it is, I think those partnerships to me have become really invaluable for when I'm not feeling it at all.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's interesting too, and again, it depends so much on the video and how long you think it's going to last, but I mean, especially if you're talking about like software tutorials, demos, software, like we experience this, like software changes all the time. You might have a product and you might put a ton of effort into this video only for the UI to change and it needs to be redone, right? So like, I think there's a balance there too of like understanding, yes, these things can be long-term and long-lasting, but that's not necessarily the case. And I feel like even more so now, like just content is coming out all the time and different stuff and different, even on the same topics. I was just watching a video last night. It came up on YouTube and I was like, I'm pretty sure I've seen this before. And it was just a recut of a video that he had already done at another point. And I was like, oh, and I watched it and I had seen the video before, it's just interesting how that works. But, if you put all that effort in and put so much trying to make it perfect, it's going to stop you from doing it because it feels overwhelming to begin with. Like, oh, I got to make the video. Like that's a huge problem. I know for me, like I've got to make the video that shares this particular point out or shows this. And it's like, well, maybe I actually end up having to make like 3 videos and that's okay. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
This reminds me of, and I share this with a lot of people, so I don't know if I've already talked about it on this show, but for anyone who knows Ira Glass, who has the formerly radio show, it is a radio show, but also podcast, This American Life, he has a famous, like 2-minute video on YouTube from an interview where he talks about creativity, and it's this idea that like when we first start out, we know what we like. I'm not going to do this justice, but we know what we like. We know what good is. and we try to do the thing. If it's a video, we try to make the video, and it's just not as good as what we know good looks like. And so we want to give up or just be like, well, I'm not good at that thing. But as he points out, like, I don't know anyone in the video field whose first video is incredible. Like, you have to do a video and then do another video and then do another video. And it sounds daunting, but don't spend the time perfecting, spend the time doing, right? Like, crunch out a large a large body of content work. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes, and the more you'll get into a flow that you like. Or that'll be the time where you're like, nope, this isn't working. Let's change it up. Let's try things differently. So I always recommend someone go Google Ira Glass on creativity, because it's an inspiring piece to just be reminded that, like, it's hard when you're first starting out. It's hard even after you've been doing it for a little while. When you feel like your work doesn't quite look like you want it to look like, it doesn't quite match up to your own expectations. So just keep doing it.
Well, I want to say that this ties in really nicely. We did some interviews with video marketing world. That these are video professionals, people who have been very successful on YouTube and making videos for brands and organizations. And a couple of them had the same idea, but it was, in particular, I think it was Jeremy Vest, and you can find the video interview on the TechSmith Academy. He talked about this principle of, like, improving by 1%. That I think goes right along with what you're saying, Andy, is like, don't focus on the end state of being like, I'm going to make this amazing, awesome video. But I'm so far over here, I'll never bridge the gap, right? He's just like, right. Your next video, get 1% better. The next video, get 1% better. And just as you iteratively add the 1%, you're going to get 100% better, right? And then that 100% is going to become 200 and 300. But it's, I think we often think we have to make these big jumps. And I think earlier on, it's easier to make some bigger jumps in quality, because you're like, oh, I learned one thing and it took me from 0 to 10. But then, the next time you're like, that jump, the next jump didn't take me as far. But you're going to get better. And I think that's going to really help you. But don't try to jump from 0 to 100 immediately. Because otherwise, you're going to be frustrated because there's so much to learn, so much to do. So I love this idea of build a body of work. Build the habits, build the repetition. It's like, oh gosh, I hate exercise, but it's like the more I exercise, the better I get at those pieces of it. I know. Yeah. No, everyone's looking at us like, yeah, we know, we can tell you hate exercise, man. but that repetition is so important, and it's hard. It's like working those muscles. You're working those muscles, but I think it's. Yeah. I love that concept that Ira Glass puts forward, because I think it's so true, right? Like, building the body, doing the work is going to help you eventually push through. In fact, one other thing I'll share here, and then someone else can talk, but we did this exercise here at TechSmith, a group. We were working on kind of building this idea of, like, really iterative early design sprint is what they call it. And we had to do this exercise called Crazy Eights. And it's basically, you have a piece of paper, you fold it into 8 pieces, and then you have to take this idea and iterate, like, come up with 8 things from this one idea. And oh my gosh, it was painful. And because you only had like 2 minutes to do this, like, it was super fast and you're going crazy, and I hated it. It was painful. And you're like, I don't have eight things. You're like stuck on 5, and you're like, but you had to get 8. And what it reminded me of, though, is that sometimes it didn't, because in the process of doing it, wasn't that the ideas were great or they got iteratively better even. It's just that by doing that, I fleshed out a lot of the kind of the notions, and everyone was doing this separately. And so just the kind of the volume spoke in terms of what we couldn't do. We couldn't have done that in terms of quality. So the volume was super helpful.
That's super interesting.
Long-winded story for that. I'm sorry.
No, but it's super interesting too, because you're right. I mean, like, even with, like, your first part where it's like, get 1% better on this one thing, you may not notice those incremental changes as they occur, but, like, look back 6 months from now at the work you've done and how it's changed, and you do start to notice the difference there. Look back a year from now and you start to notice a difference there. So yeah, incremental changes, though not immediately gratifying, do make a big change over time. And I think the design sprint idea, though, that's a tough one, because I'm the kind of person who, like, when you tell me to come up with one idea, I sometimes am like, go. Putting it down on paper is not easy.
Yeah, I like that idea, though, Andy, because I think it's so true, and I've told this to even folks on my team, where it's look back a year ago and what for us, like, what were your blog content a year ago? at
Right.
what level were you creating that content compared to now? Or like, for you, Andy, at what level were we? And maybe it's not even like quality, but like maybe it's process. Maybe we've gotten
Yeah.
faster. Maybe it's and maybe sometimes it is quality. Maybe the quality has been upped in different ways and you've learned different things, but it's not like you set out to necessarily do that. It's just, again, by doing it, you slowly build on these
Exactly.
skills that help you get better and better and better, to where it's like you kind of look back, you're like, oh man, yeah, I definitely know this that I didn't know a year ago. And it wasn't this real concerted effort to try to figure that out.
Yeah. Learn by doing.
Yep.
I want to bring up one other idea that we talked about kind of pre-show, and I want to make sure we talk about it here. Is that especially for people recording on camera, right? We had to come on camera today. We've had some kind of interesting couple weeks. I think feeling the motivation, and one of the things I wanted to share, just a conversation I had with a gentleman, Oz Du Soleil, who was a guest on the Visual Lounge. You can find his interview out on YouTube. And he talked about he's doing improv classes, which I thought, like, well, that's interesting. He makes, like tutorial videos on like Excel and databases and things like that. And I'm like, improv classes, really? He's already a super cool dude. And I was like, oh, tell me more about improv classes. And he talked about doing character work, which I'm like, man, okay. But his thing was he is a persona. Whenever you're on camera, I mean, I think we're pretty genuinely who we are when we come to the Visual Lounge, right? But his idea is like, when that camera is on, you are a persona. You are not, I am not Matt Pierce that if you just meet me at a show or, talk to me in the hallway or, never in a hallway because we're not at work anymore, but, wherever. It's like the person that you see here should be a little bit different, and not in a dramatic way, but like there is an
Engaging.
on-camera persona. Like I am turning up the volume a little bit, like the way I talk, the energy, how much I use my hands is. I'm doing it a lot for emphasis now, but like those things are different than like when Justin comes in my office. There's elements of that, but it's not the same. And I think we need to be able to tap into that persona of who we are on camera. And Andy, I'm sure when you're making your YouTube videos, it's a similar thing, right? Like you are turning up the energy, you're projecting a little bit more, you're turning that Andy into a little bit different Andy, and not because you want to be anyone you're not, but just because the camera needs it. You need to feel inside of your chest and your head that, okay, this is how I am. When that camera's on, this is how I'm going to be, versus me typing back here, just kind of sitting back, right? So I think it's really important to figure that out. So when you're not feeling it, you can say like, well, of course Matt's not feeling it, but on camera, Matt, he's ready to go.
Yep.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I think that regardless of what video, because now I'm instantly thinking of like some, internal videos, right? If you're trying to internally train somebody on something, or if you're like that is absolutely important there too, for like even for something like onboarding, to where you could think of these two worlds where you have one set of both are a video on learning the project management software, but one, you actually put effort into trying to bring some, personality and trying to like make this an enjoyable experience, to where they can, at the end of it, they feel like, oh, this is fun and I learned and I feel like I'm set up. Versus the other side, which could be, hello, this is the project management software you'll be, you know what I mean? It's just a very different vibe. I think of some of the internal shareouts we've seen recently, even from folks on our team, and it's like you can tell, right? And it's just more engaging, it's more fun, you're more invested, you remember what they talked about, like, so bringing that personality and bringing that level up is super important, because I think it helps with even the information retention.
And I want to click on those videos more when I see them putting out a new video. Like our coworker Jessie just put out a video that was it was an informational share out, but oh my gosh, she left in some real life elements to it, of her kids in the background and her cat. And honestly, normally you hear that and you're like, oh, well, you probably should have edited that out. It's not as, no, it was so much more engaging because it was so real and authentic, and it was great. And beyond that, I don't know, Matt, you said like, do I have like the on-camera Andy, like I get more, I actually feel like I do the wrong thing. And you've got me sitting here thinking about it in my head. And I'm like, I feel like when I go in the studio, I almost turn it down. And I don't mean to, but I want to be like this kind of like, hey, how are you? Like, my wife tells me all the time, I am a very loud man. And so I have to remember not to like shout into the microphone when I'm, talking. And so I almost tone it down. And now I'm thinking like, I need to tone it back up. Like I need to be a little more me, even if I'm not as, shouty. But have that kind of on camera. You're right. It's funny because I spend so much time editing and behind the camera that being in front of the camera is a whole different set of challenges. And I empathize with anyone who suddenly finds themselves thrust into this position because, yeah, it's a different set of skills. And I think the only thing I can think to tell you is fake it till you make it. Like, just turn it on and hope for the best. And if you feel like you're going over the top, you're probably right where you need to be.
Well, Andy, I'll say so I want to clarify. I don't think everyone has to turn up the volume. Like that's what I do. I think like you probably,
right.
Your persona is probably that like much more friendly, helpful, like, hey guys, I want to help you out with this today. And let me talk about these 3 things, like versus
sure.
like, I'm trying to like, this is live. I'm trying to bring some energy. Let's get excited. Mm-hmm. I have one speed. What am I going to, so I think find that personality that works. I do think it's like whatever that is, you want to be able to tap into it in the moment, right? Like, and it could be that you've got the very corporate personality, and that may be exactly what your company wants you to do and need. But like in this video, we're going to talk about 3 things to keep you safe from dying. If that's what your company wants, fine, do it. But be able to tap into that, so because there's going to be a day, everyone will have it, that you don't feel it. You don't want to get on camera. You don't want to edit. You don't want to make this video. And you're going to have to. And it's like, what strategies are you going to employ that we talked about? And you have your own that are going to allow you to get this done. So I think with that, though, we're kind of long on time today. I think it's been a really great conversation. Let's get our final takes in here. And let's wrap things up for today. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, of course. We always appreciate the likes, the feedback, the comments, the subscriptions. All of those things are always super important. So, Andy, what's your final take?
I knew you'd start with me because I didn't have one yet. So I'm just going to make this up and hope for the best. Honestly, I used to work at an after-school daycare, and we used to tell our employees and each other, just to encourage ourselves, like, leave your baggage at the door and then pick it up when you're leaving, because those kids needed us to be there with them and be engaged. And I think the same can be true of video. Like, I may not be feeling it. We all have days, weeks where we're just not feeling it. Leave it at the door, turn the camera on, pretend you're feeling it sometimes if you have to, and get the video done, and then pick up life after you turn the camera off. I empathize because, again, this is, sometimes you're just not in the mood to record a video or edit a video. But I think there's a way to kind of push through that and get to the next one. And hopefully you'll feel better the next time. You'll be in a better place. You'll be ready to move on and do better work the next time.
Awesome.
That may have been trash advice. Who knows?
No, it's good advice. Justin, what's your final take?
We'll see what they say. My take is to have a plan. I think if you can set yourself up to have a consistent plan for how, even if it alters here and there, but a consistent plan for how you're going to make your video content, that takes a level of stress off of you to where you don't have to, it doesn't have to be this big daunting task, and you can kind of take bite-sized chunks. And if you're not feeling one piece of the process, maybe you work on another piece of the process, or try to do some different things that kind of keep the project moving along, but you don't have to feel this pressure to do it all at once.
That is awesome advice. My final take here is it's really 2 things. One, get a buddy that can help, you can talk to, that you can help encourage you, that can look at your stuff when you can't do it anymore. And 2, tap into that personality. Whatever those personality traits are that you need to bring out, get that persona made and for yourself, and then be able to figure out how to switch in and out of that as needed, because there's going to be a time when you're going to just need to sit there and smile. Regardless of everything else that's going around you, you're going to need to be able to do this and get into that work. And I think that can be super helpful. So with that said, everybody, thank you so much again for tuning into the Visual Lounge. We will be with you again soon. Talk to you later.